So, external affairs and campaigns, relatively new position. Why do you think it is necessary to have this as a sabbatical officer?
Sure. Well, I think student unions sort of should basically be there to exist for like three main things. I think number one, providing a place for students to relax in, like a cafe or a bar. Number two, providing somewhere for societies and sports clubs to thrive and flourish. And the third reason, the reason why there should be an EACO in the first place, is to campaign on issues that matter to and affect students. And so the EACO should be active in campaigning on issues that specifically directly affect students, or indeed matter to them personally, because they feel it's they're part of the wider community. Students, as any other constituency, they want to get involved in the world. They're active in the world. They want someone to represent them when they're out in the, campaigning. UCL Union should be a union that helps facilitate that. You know.
And UCL, you don't think UCL did this before the position was established?
I don't think there certainly wasn't a specific role. It was sort of lumped in with the education and campaigns officer, and to allow someone directly to deal with external organisations like the NUS and things like that, I think that's important, because UCL is, what we call ourselves a global university. We're very much part of the London, community. We're very much part of, and even big communities as part of that. There needs to be someone to be the link between UCL and the wider community, and it's especially in the issues of campaigns and things like that.
And what are your links to the wider campaigning community in London or UCL in general?
Personally or UCL?
Yes, personally. I mean, how can you represent? Do you have contacts? Are you part of other organisations?
Well, UCL itself is obviously part of things like, as well as the NUS, but ULU as well. And ULU, there's obviously the news that the University of London Union is being shut down democratically. I think UCL Union is right to completely oppose that, and UCL if ULU is closed down, it'll probably be replaced by something. Hopefully, if we get a democratic sort of institution to replace it, get something like an NUS London that's democratically run by students. UCLU should form part of that pan-London campaign that hopefully will replace ULU. Because frankly, if ULU is replaced by a pan-London union, that'll be good, because all London students should be involved in a broad campaigning union, because many of the issues that affect us as students affect every other student in London, because of the fact that we live in London. Issues like housing, you can't just separate that out for UCL students and not every other students. You can't really separate that out from students and non-students, because the issue of housing in London is a big issue that that needs to be talked about in a broad sense. So UCL Union should certainly try hard to form an integral member of the London community of students who are campaigning on issues like housing that matter to them. Yeah.
So Hannah Webb, when she does her progress updates, often talks about how she has been involved in organising various campaigns like Cops Off Campus and Save ULU. Do you have any relevant experience, or how would you organise campaigns? What would you do to make them efficient?
I think I commend Hannah on getting involved in those campaigns. I think they're very important ones. I was involved as any other student was in Cops Off Campus, and the demonstrations and the occupation of Senate House and things like that. So I would be experienced enough to know who to work with in terms of ULU. Obviously, that would be replaced, so we'd have to form links with other people in those campaigns. I think that Hannah's right to focus on issues like that, because I think they directly affect us as students in our day-to-day sort of life as students. Cops Off Campus. It's an important question. Should police be allowed on campus without express permission given to them by the students? I think my personal opinion is university should be a free space of inquiry and debate and discussion, and police shouldn't form a part of that, and so should not be on campus unless absolutely invited to be so. In case for our own safety we decide we want police, we should be able to decide that, and the union is obviously the representative of students and should be able to guide that policy. And she's also been involved in many, which I'd commend her on again, on campaigns about worker struggles in and around Bloomsbury, like the Tres Cosas campaign in Senate House, as well as the strike for fair pay in UCL and every other university. I think that's good. I think one of the good things about Hannah Webb, and one thing I'd want to do and improve on, is a good SAB basically is a SAB that doesn't just sit in the office and do everything on their own. A sabbatical officer, especially EACO, a campaigns officer, good campaigns are not run by one person sort of just doing stuff and like talking and emailing or having a chat with someone. Campaigns are run from a broad base with students, and EACO, the External Affairs and Campaigns Officer, should be the person to lead that campaign and facilitate people to act out what they need to do. There's a lot of creativity in UCL, and we want to harness that for our campaigns, and there's we need to get as many students involved, because that's where the most successful campaigns succeed in. The Carpenters campaign 2 years ago that I was involved with in a minor way, the reason why that was successful was because the SABs were one little role in and amongst that helped facilitate all the other students who were involved in that campaign. I think that's what EACO should be doing.
One of your manifesto commitments is to campaign for more affordable housing. How would this work in the context of private landlords?
Sure, I think the best way to start on an issue like that is with the people who are already sort of organised, in halls. So I lived in halls last year. Many people live in halls in their first year. There are already a bunch of people who have similar, interests, a similar sort of day-to-day sort of life in living in halls. What you need to do is they're already halls reps. I would myself like to get those halls reps together, form a proper network of halls reps who discuss what their issues are. A lot of them pay extremely high rent. I mean, over £200 a week, which is an obscenity. I paid fairly good rent when I was in first year, but the downside to that is when you pay really good rent, what that means is you have dreadful conditions, things like that. So issues like high rent or dreadful conditions need to be brought out with from this network of hall reps, and therefore as a student body we can lobby UCL for for our grievances, to sort them out, lower, and obviously collective power is the way you're able to succeed in that, because if a lot of students are very angry, you've got a mandate behind you to say, well look, UCL, this is unacceptable, and potentially you could go on to do like in an ideal world, rent strikes and things like that to actually show that this is what we mean. From that, I think success is the build. From that, we can help organise students. Like now I live in private accommodation. Students in private accommodation, or help organise them in their own tenants' unions in and around London, on their own issues and campaigns, because they have them separate to the ones at UCL. I think we start off with halls because they're a winnable thing to campaign for, and private rented accommodation should very much be involved with the wider London campaign for housing, because housing in London is a big issue. The gentrification of various parts of London, the cost of living crisis, that's all part and parcel of living in London. And students like me and many other students who have private accommodations need to be an integral part of the wider conversation that we're having about housing in London, conversations we should be having with the mayor, we should be lobbying the mayor and things like that. UCL Union should help facilitate the student voice within that.
University of London is knocking down the garden halls at the moment. Are you not worried that in an effort to renovate UCL halls, a similar situation could occur, that University of London halls renovate their halls and give them to private suppliers for 10 years or so?
I think. I mean, when we ask for conditions to be improved, we would actively oppose any attempt to privatise halls, because this is what happens when halls are privatised. It's no longer the domain of the university. The university doesn't have to make a profit on halls. I mean, they own the bloody halls. Private companies can do what they like. I mean, they're a private company. Companies like Unite and Nido and things like that extort students for a lot, especially international students, people like that first year students who don't know what you ought to be paying, so they don't know, so they pay what they need to pay because they want the security. I think UCL should actively oppose any privatisation of halls, and ask for university resources to be spent on renovating halls without things like what's happening in garden halls, which is knocking them down, not giving anyone a replacement. As well as that, making a lot of people redundant, a lot of people who work in garden halls. That's one of the issues in the Tres Costas campaign, to give them more replacement jobs in the meantime. I think hall privatisation is one of the key issues that we need to oppose, because it leads to things like this. It leads to people going, we'll knock it down and we'll replace it by some private provider who will do it all for you for an extortionate price.
There have been quite a few strikes recently at UCL by the lecturers, and one of your manifesto commitments is to support our staff. But at the same time, a lot of students are uncomfortable. They want to support the strike, but they are uncomfortable due to UCL regulations insisting they have to be at a certain number of lectures. How would you support the UCL students in this matter while supporting staff?
So, you know, I'm a student, I know what this is like. It's really annoying when a strike is happening and we're paying £9,000 a year now. I certainly am. People in my year below are paying £9,000 a year for this education, and then they find out some of their lectures are off. I think it's important to remind people who is to blame for this. The people to blame for this are the same people, in fact, in a broader sense, the same people who raised their tuition fees to £9,000. It's the university managements up and down the country who have instigated a policy where now there's been a 13%, I think, pay cut in the last 4 years, and as well as that, 14% gender pay gap. This has happened. We need to tell students that the people that we're opposing, that have implemented this, are our enemies as well, because we can't get a great education. We can't. What's the point of paying £9,000 for education if our lecturers are miffed off because they're not getting adequate pay? So I think the best way to make sure students, I absolutely sympathise with a student who has to go in because they have to do registers, because otherwise, if you're an international student, it's very difficult, especially. You can't just miss a bunch of your lectures. You'll get in trouble, which is a deep shame. I think registration of lectures is another issue that we should oppose as well. I absolutely sympathise with that. That's why I think the way to make sure the students and staff are on the same side is to, students won't go into lectures if their lectures are called off. We as students have an interest in having this pay dispute resolved, not least because we want our lectures to resume, but also so that our lecturers have a fair pay scheme, so that we can, have a better time of our education at this university. It's important to note, in a broader sense, we think university management only hinder rather than help the whole course of running of the university. And I think universities in the long run should be seen as a democratic institution that should be run more or less by academics and students.
Okay. And part of your manifesto also says you want to build international solidarity.
Sure.
How does this, in what sense do you think this would be?
When I wrote that, what I meant was, on issues of international importance, our university is, lucky enough to be very, very global in terms of a large proportion of our students are international students, and as well as that, there are a lot of international issues that affect students. One of the just a sort of not that small. I was going to say small issue, but it's not that small. An issue that coming up is the new immigration bill that the government is putting forward. That would mean foreign workers and students in this country would have to pay to use NHS facilities, and as well as that, doctors would be forced to check immigration statuses and things like that of people in the country, including students, of course, and that making doctors effectively border guards. I think those sort of things need to be stamped out. I think one of the great things about, certainly for me, I've come to UCL, one of the great things about it is, meeting people from all sorts of, all over the world. That will be damaged. Who's going to want to come to a country that treats foreign workers and students like this, that makes them pay for institutions like the NHS that we all get for free. Those are the sort of issues that we should campaign heavily against. This is coming up right now. That's certainly unacceptable. But as well as that, international, issues affecting students, but also that matter to students, issues such as what's going on in Syria right now, what's going on in Palestine, things like that are of importance to students. And if students want to campaign over things like that, they absolutely should, because they're worried about them as any other person is. The union should be able to facilitate that by giving them the resources they need to campaign on issues like that. Sure.
Yeah, this is just like my last thing that I wanted to question. You talk about self-organised liberation campaigns looking at like women's LGBT plus. You mentioned that you're a feminist, anti-racist. Like, how do you visualise working with other liberation officers towards campaigns?
Sure. Yeah, I am. I'm proud of it. I'm a socialist, but and from that, I'm an anti-racist. But I think consider myself a socialist feminist as well. I think it's important that those organisations are autonomous, and that I don't we should be involved in it, because obviously it's you don't say, oh, it's a feminist issue, so just let women deal with it. It affects us all, and therefore we should be involved, but it should be led by autonomous, self-organised liberation campaigns and things like that. What I would say is that I would push, personally, I think I would push for, we've got a women's officer, we've got a BME officer. Union policy is that all liberations are equal. It's not like it's worse to be a woman than it is to be LGBT in the world in terms of oppression. I personally think that we should push for an LGBT officer that's full-time, or at the very least given more support, because the LGBT plus officer does a lot, and as well as a disabled students officer. I think we should have their own. They should have their own officers, obviously voted on by students who self-define, to take the lead in campaigns that worry and affect women's organisations, BME organisations, disabled and LGBT plus organisations like that. That's what I would push for. I think it's perfectly good that we have a women's officer and a BME officer. We should also have LGBT plus and disabled students officers if we're going to have that. Or at the very least, those issues should be dealt with by sabbatical officers.